Part of the secret to building a sustainable consulting practice isn't about doing more work for clients, but about teaching them to become self sufficient. My guest today, Mark Rapier, turned conventional consulting business on its head when he decided to position himself as an advisor who helps clients learn rather than a consultant who creates dependency. And it's this mindset shift that allowed him to build a consulting practice on his own terms after leaving corporate consulting. My name is AJ Riedel. This is the Thriving Through podcast, where each week I have real conversations with seasoned, successful self-employed consultants about what it really takes to build a successful, profitable, and fulfilling consulting practice. Today's conversation is especially valuable if you're struggling to differentiate yourself from other consultants or wondering how to build consistent revenue without working around the clock. Mark shares his framework for understanding the three types of consultants and how choosing to be an advisor instead of a contractor changes everything about how you price, market, and deliver your services. You'll also hear Mark's honest take on what infrastructure you actually need to replace when you leave corporate consulting and what you can leave behind. Plus, he reveals how writing a book became one of his most powerful business development tools, and why he believes the key to staying relevant in consulting is something he calls preparing for the next wave. Whether you're just starting your independent consulting journey or looking to reposition your existing practice, Mark's insights on continuous learning, strategic positioning, and building a business that supports your lifestyle goals will give you practical strategies you can implement immediately. Let's dive into my conversation with Mark Rapier. Welcome to the Thriving Through podcast.
Thank you for having me
here. Yes, I'm happy to be with Mark Rapier. Mark has a wonderful story. He is a semi-retired consultant, so we will find out more about that. But first, Mark, I want to ask you a question about your path to becoming a self-employed consultant. What was your path?
Well, my path was accelerated. I had started planning for it probably around 2018, 2019, because I knew I wanted to hit retirement age and I didn't want to work 60-hour weeks anymore and be on airplanes 45 weeks a year. So I was framing out what a practice would look like. And then COVID accelerated that process by about 3 years. So I jumped into it, sort of into the deep end, because all my collateral wasn't quite ready and everything else. But you just go where life takes you.
Exactly. And what happened during COVID that caused you to accelerate your timetable?
Well, the company I was working for at the time, because I was always a consultant. That's one thing I have. I was always a consultant. And when there was more work than people, life was okay. When there's more people than work, choices get made. And the nature of the company that I was with, being a full partnership model, I wasn't on the partner track. So I was in the way.
Got it.
To be polite, but it's
Yes.
just how business works.
Exactly. So you've been a consultant for many, many years. So the skill of consulting is nothing new for you. But the running your own consulting business was very new. So tell me what the difference is between working in a big company with tons of resources and being a solo self-employed consultant.
There's a couple of things. One, you lose access to a lot of internal resources that you could just leverage to create content or whatever you wanted to do. You have to do your own business development. And like I say, there's just that infrastructure that supports you as a consultant working for a large consulting firm that just obviously I to decide what I wanted to recreate and decide what I wanted to leave behind. And that was the early part of the process. And then the next thing part of it is had to understand why I really wanted to do it. I just sort of vaguely knew, but it really comes down to I enjoy what I do. I'm good at it. I want to keep learning, but I also want to help my clients learn and be successful. So it's more of that symbiotic. We both get to learn and we charge them to success. And it keeps me busy and out of my wife's hair.
Okay. I love it. So it sounds like the why you wanted to do this was pretty important, and that pretty early in the process you recognized that you needed to have a maybe more compelling why.
I, not so much a more compelling why, but probably more focused than I had gotten to that point. It's because you have to decide what kind of consultant you want to be. I tend to view life in Venn diagrams,
Okay.
and you can be an independent consultant, but in practice, you could end up being working as if you were an independent contractor performing a specific set of tasks. You could be a consultant where you're brought in to help run a project or a specific initiative, or you can be an advisor where you're helping people pull things together and make their plans and help them make those plans work. So as I think about those three parameters, and they overlap, I mean, there's a
Mhm.
bit of, got to do a bit of all of them in this, but my focus is being the advisor. When I introduce myself to clients, I tell them that I help you map digital journeys and guide your teams and your leadership to success. I don't, but I don't want to do the work because one, they know their business better than I ever will, even though I know a lot. And two, I really want to teach them how to become more self-sufficient. One of the things a lot of consulting firms do is they really don't enable their clients to do it themselves. And now I'm in a position where that's my goal, is to help them learn how to do a lot of this stuff on their own.
Okay. I like your sort of the three sort of types of consultants. So the one is not even, I mean, more of a contractor. It's a gun for hire.
Yep.
That's a consultant who's trading time for money. And then you've got the consultant who is coming in for a specific project.
But
So,
still in a specific project or a specific activity, still a gun for hire, but but there's more of a management aspect to it. I know one of your previous guests was a program project manager. That's what I would call a consultant. They're being brought in to provide a skill rather than get the words right. There's skills and there's expertise. You being brought in to do expertise, not just to have the skills that somebody else is going to tell them how to use them.
okay. And then the third one is the advisor.
Is the advisor, which sort of sits on top of that pyramid and says, here's what you need to do, here's why you need to do it, and here's the best way to approach it, and here's what you need, here's the talent you need to assemble to make it work.
And I love that. I love that is sort of the gap that you, with your all your experience in the consulting world, you saw the gap where many consulting practices kind of don't want to teach their clients to be independent. They want to keep those projects going. How did you discover the gap, and how did it shape your practice? This gap between helping them build and just implementing and then leaving.
Uh, It, it came about primarily because as I progressed through my consulting career and I started working for larger and larger clients on larger and larger programs, um, I began to see the consultant is about getting the job done. The consultant is as much about coaching and leading through influence as it is getting the job done to help them be successful. Because if you're doing like one project I did, it was a 5-year program to roll out a new HR system around the world and, 50, 60 plus countries. So there's an influence gatherer to set that up and to get everybody on the same page. So they'll all work toward the solution, even though it's, and Thomas Jefferson once said, diplomacy is the art of everybody agreeing and nobody being 100% happy. Well, that's what a really good advising consultant needs to do, is to get people to understand, here's the net end game for everybody, even though nobody gets everything that they want. And it's something I just sort of evolved into, is how to be a leader in that situation, which is the tactic I'm taking now.
Okay. When we talked earlier, you told a story about the interim CIO, Chief Information Officer.
Yep.
Yes, where you uncovered something. Tell us about that interim role and what you learned, what you uncovered.
Well, it was an interim role, and I was brought in when their CIO left, and I was brought in September-ish, and my charge was to keep the lights on. Everything was fine. That was the message. And sort of help set the budget, set priorities, and then they'd hire the next CIO to those priorities. But as I started assuming I had to do a turnaround, started asking some of my basic core questions. What's going on? Why is it happening? Rather than just take the word that everything's okay. I uncovered several major deficiencies that had evolved over the previous 3 to 5 years that put business continuity at severe risk in certain scenarios that were not outrageous scenarios. So as I laid out the budget and pointed all those things out, it was what I needed to do, but it did cause consternation on the client side because people missed it and those questions got asked. And so it was a learning experience. I looked back at that hard, figured out how I could have communicated better, how I could have been a better diplomat. But at the end of the day, the magnitude of what I found had impacts that I really didn't want to have happen, but they happened.
What does that experience, what should other consultants take away from that experience about looking for the problems clients don't know they have? Because they didn't know they had that problem, right?
No, they did not. I mean, they were marching down a path of, financial stability so they could go public. And so they had a certain mindset that they were operating on. And it's like a lot of things, small decisions got made over the course of a long period of time that nobody realized what they added up to. And that's, in the fresh set of eyes, is what identified those things. So it is ask questions, explore, keep asking questions, ask different people the same questions to get the different perspectives on what's going on. And then as you find things, come up with solution plans to mitigate the risks that are presented and communicate them as best you can. And then things happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But your obligation is to do what's right for the enterprise that's hiring you, not necessarily the individuals that are hiring you.
And that's sometimes tricky because you're working closely with the individuals.
Absolutely.
And there's a relationship there. And doing what's best for the enterprise isn't always what's going to be palatable to the person that your point person there.
That's exactly correct. And that's happened several times where you start doing what you need to do. And, in one case, it was a person who was well into their career. We were taking them to a new technology stack, and it made their position vulnerable because they were no longer the expert in the stack. And it's how do you help them through the learning curve and position them to do it well. And then ultimately, this gentleman decided he was in his early 60s at the time, so he stopped to retire instead. He didn't want to go through an entirely brand new learning curve because he was ready. But you're always having to look at, well, how will the change how could the change the organization wants to make negatively impact the people that are there, and how can you help them prepare themselves to be successful in the new world?
Right. Because otherwise the project or initiative isn't going to be successful if you don't take into account the people.
Correct. And even if the initiative is successful, you could damage individuals.
Yeah. It's a lot to juggle.
It is, and that's the art of consulting. It's its own skill set. And as I got deeper into my career and I got further and further away from technical expertise, that became my job, which was making clients successful and keeping the teams that reported to me um, gainfully employed and busy. Because if I made bad decisions and we didn't sell work, then bad things are going to happen to them. So I never forgot that responsibility as well.
Right. I want to switch gears and talk about you wrote The Leader with 1,000 Faces during the pandemic.
Yes.
Tell us about how writing that book has helped your consulting practice.
It's part of what you have to do if you're an independent consultant is be able to present yourself as a thought leader, somebody who can help people think, not just do things. And because leadership, as I mentioned before, became a skill I had to develop in ways that a lot of people don't to be a successful consulting senior manager or vice president, depending on the companies I was at and the titles I held. It's just a subject that fascinated me. I've probably read hundreds of books and thousands of articles on this up, and all of them sort of missed what I thought was a key point, which is your leadership journey never ends. You're always learning. You're always gaining experience. You're learning how to do things differently and do new things. And so the premise of the book is leadership is a journey. There's things you learn, you lead something, that experience teaches you something, and then you go off and learn new things and you do it again. And then it teaches you how to be situationally aware too, because you lead differently in a crisis than you do in a turnaround, than you do in a steady state operation. So you have to be thinking about how you're going to approach people and issues and things to do with those three perspectives in mind.
How do you use your book as a business development tool?
Well, it's an anchor that I use to manage all of my newsletter posts and various things that I do. I have a newsletter which I publish on multiple platforms, and I try and tie everything I point back to some form of a leadership observation or a leadership lesson. I did one last week. My wife and I took a weekend trip to meet friends and attend the Richmond Folk Music Festival. So you're going around doing all these things, and I listened to musical genres that I'd never heard of before, and it was quite fascinating. And so I came back and wrote an article. Says, what that taught me was always expand your horizons. In any direction, in any context you can, because every time you expand your horizons, you train your brain to think differently, and you'll see solutions you didn't have before. Now, of course, one of my friends jokingly called me up and said I'm a dork because I wrote a leadership article about a music festival. That's a yeah.
Well, that friend probably isn't a self-employed consultant.
No, they were a peer. They're a good friend, but it was just fun. Yeah. So I'm very active on all the platforms. I'm constantly writing articles, and that's one of the things an independent consultant has to do. You have to keep yourself out there. You have to do your own business development, but the best business development is making you easily findable. You want the opportunities to come to you rather than you have to find every opportunity. And as I increased my activities, especially on LinkedIn, that that traffic coming to me with potential opportunities has increased. So that's my channel. But I post regularly and frequently. I mean, I comment every day. I put an article out about once a week or once every 2 weeks. You know, and I research them. I find the proof points. I find reference articles. It's not just a thought that I threw on a piece of paper. It's researched and it's put out there. But it's all trying to prove to people that I can look at a lot of subjects and take away perspectives that you can learn from and move forward with.
I want to touch on something you just said. So LinkedIn, you post articles, and then you post articles every week or two, and that you are starting to get opportunities coming to you.
Yeah, getting early, or like any sales funnel, there's a lot of stuff at the top that's got to work through to get to the funnel. But I get a lot more initial discussions around, am I the right fit for what they need? And am I the right fit, the right time, all the other things that are there to make that work. And it keeps me, for all the connections I have that I worked with, it keeps me front of mind, because some of the opportunities have come from people I know who knew somebody, but because I'm always top of mind, because they're always seeing something on the feed, it happens. It's, you know, it's all organic when you're an independent consultant.
Right, right. You work primarily through your networks to find projects.
I do.
For consultants who are just starting out or who don't have decades of those corporate relationships, what advice would you give them about building a network that actually generates business?
I would, based on their domain of expertise, whatever it is, whether it's marketing or human resources or whatever it is, find the professional organizations that support that and join them. Become active in the local chapters. Volunteer if they have an event. Volunteer to sit at the registration table and hand out badges. You'll start meeting people. Then you'll be able to connect with people. And if you combine that with the presentations that the things you publish, and there's, you know, the advice I've gotten is you write newsletters, you write the occasional short post, you comment on posts that exist, and sometimes you reshare them if you've got a lot to say. But you do all those things, and you do them every day, because you're rewarding the LinkedIn algorithm to get you like a good search page. You enter a search on Google. If you get to the bottom of the first page, you aren't seeing what you like, you go back and you fix the query. You don't go to page 2. Nobody does. So you've got to work to get yourself on LinkedIn's first page. And it just takes activity to do that. And if you focus it well, start following influencers. There are several people. Somehow, I have no idea how I got it, but I got it. But LinkedIn has this thing called a top voice, which is a recommended person to follow. Find a bunch of those and get on their feeds and comment on their feeds, especially the ones I have a good following, not a massive following, but there are several folks I've connected with through this process who have hundreds of thousands of followers. You comment on their stuff, there's a potential that a whole lot of people could see it. And it's just very proactive. But the hardest thing to do when you're independent is your own business development, especially when you've got something that's consuming all of your time. But you have to figure out how to do it.
Have to figure it out. How much time do you spend on LinkedIn all in? Creating content and then commenting and
I'll
on other people's
spend
posts?
15 to 20 minutes looking for posts to comment on in the morning. I'll check the messages 2 or 3 times a day to see what popped in. A newsletter probably takes me 8 to 10 hours over the course of a week to write. By the time I outline it, I search for relevant stuff, and that's where AI comes in. I put down a hypothesis and I let it find me things that support the premise I'm making, which usually comes from some kind of a news feed that I subscribe to. I probably get too damn many emails because I'm on all these news feeds, but the article I put out today came from an article. Popped an idea, started an idea, and I wrote an article. But from knowing what I want to write about to getting it to publish I publish the same newsletter 4 places and then share it in a couple more. That's probably eight hours a newsletter, but a really well-written, tight newsletter is not easy. There is no stream of consciousness that sounds really good when somebody's reading it in a rush on an airport on a phone. It's got to be tight.
Right. Yep. The shorter and more concise it is, the more work it takes.
Yes.
Yes. You just moved to Atlanta.
Yes.
And you mentioned having to rebuild your local networks. Walk us through your approach. What are you doing specifically to establish yourself in a new market?
One advantage I had, as I was a consultant, is I went through my existing links and found everybody who had a presence in Georgia. And one of them was a person I met when I lived in Detroit working for EDS at the GM account. He now lives in Atlanta, and he introduced me to a bunch of people he knows. So I'm just doing the organic networking. It's 1, 2, 3. It's the Kevin Bacon game, 6 steps to separation. But you just got to keep pushing it out there and pushing it out there. As I meet more people and get connections going that way, I had a call this morning with a gentleman that he connected with me, but it must have been because I was popping up on feeds from people I just connected with in Atlanta, because he's solely focused on Atlanta. So just keep working. Networking is hard because it's a social activity as well as a business activity, and you have to keep it personable, pleasant. You can't be afraid to ask, but you can't ask for too much. Mm. People love to help as long as it's not a real burden.
Right. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's if you reach out to somebody who you don't know and you say, I'm here, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? That's going to sort of fall on deaf ears. If you reach out to them and say, I'm new to the area, I'm trying to understand the market, I looked at your firm, it's interesting, it seems to be well connected, I'd love to learn more about your company and how it ties into the market, what I can learn from that. And that's the conversation you lead with. Because then all you're asking to do is share information. You're not actually asking them to do anything for you. And then if that conversation or two goes well, they will do something for you without hesitation. But you got to build that first level of trust before you start asking for favors.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Do you use direct messaging as an outreach on LinkedIn?
Occasionally, but not very often. My direct messaging is more about building the network. It's finding somebody right to get that conversation started. I wouldn't say I direct message, here's my services, will you buy them?
Right. The reason I asked is it strikes me that what you just said about that first, contacting people for networking in a market is really strikes me that this concept can be extended to direct messages, that you're asking, it's a small ask if I want to find out more about you and your company, rather than that we get so many DMs of people saying, you first connect with them and then they're busy pitching you.
Right.
So, and what you're saying about in-person or local networking, the same is true in DMs, direct messages, it's just another form of networking.
It really is. And there's an excellent book called Friend of a Friend of a Friend by David Burkus that talks about how to leverage your networks effectively, because there's your closest friends, there's probably 15 or 20 of them. There's a circle, and there's a circle. And it's that third and fourth circles that are the most valuable from a job search perspective or a business build perspective. But you work through your first two layers to get there, so you're coming with some credibility before you ask them for anything. It's an excellent book. There's a handful of, like I say, back in my book, there's a reading that's 4 pages long, so it's one of them. But it is about building a strategic network and how you reach out to the network, whether it's through a LinkedIn post or a LinkedIn direct message or direct email. It's still networking. To your point.
Yes. Yes. I like that. For me, that it's kind of a nice reframe. Because when I hear the word direct outreach, there's something different about hearing direct outreach versus networking. They're
Yeah.
really kind of the same thing when done well.
When
But
done well.
direct outreach, the underlying assumption is that it's more salesy, when in reality, it's just another form of networking.
When it's done well, it's another form of networking. When it's done poorly, it's spam.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, there are many times when I'm in messages on LinkedIn and I click on the little buttons or dots at the top and delete conversation,
Yeah,
you know?
got to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get overloaded.
I, you talked about when you're evaluating whether to take on a project, you mentioned that you'll sometimes walk away from a deal if you're not the best fit, even though you could do the work. How do you make that decision? And what has saying no taught you about building a sustainable practice?
Uh, I'll start with the second part of that question first. What saying no does is it makes you available for the thing that's right.
Ooh, I like that. Say
So
that again. That's really important.
saying no makes you available for the thing that's right. And what I do when I was at the consulting firms, we always had this concept of chasing large proposals for big companies. You could easily spend, when you took a time and labor and printing cost, you could spend $250,000 chasing an opportunity. So you had to ask yourself the hard question: what's the upside of the project and the potential client? And is it worth the upfront cost? Now, the upfront costs are mostly your time in an independent consulting firm, but if it's going to take you 40 hours to get embedded in this company to do something that's going to be short, or something you're not going to enjoy, or you're not the best fit, or they're not in industry that's best suited for your experience and expertise, that's a lot of investment for something that's not going to be fulfilling. So you got to make your business case for each individual opportunity that comes your way. And again, one advantage I have to a lot of independent consultants is, since I started in consulting, a lot of that stuff sort of comes naturally. It's just reframed a little bit. The other advantage I had is I had a real good sense of what I should be charging myself for, because I knew what my companies were billing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what I was making all in with total compensation. And then you sort of begin to understand what's the corporate overhead that's part of the profit that you take out, so that the profit that's on you is yours. And that's how you keep your numbers high enough to be successful and make good money, but not so high people won't buy you, because you're still
Right.
cheaper than somebody with potentially less skill coming from a named firm. You're still less expensive than they are. You're never cheap. Never say you're cheap. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Pricing, especially for newer consultants, pricing is pothole-ridden topic.
It
You
is.
know, yeah. So you've given a great framework.
Yeah,
What
and
you
it's,
just said.
you got to think about what if you're doing it for the first time and you're coming out, your only real frame of reference is the position that you had and the experience that you had. So you've got a salary plus 27, 30% for benefits, and then add some kind of a profit margin to it. That sort of sets a range. And then, at least on the advisory side, this is something I can do that some of the others can't, is um, I have a number I go in and I have a number in my head that I won't go below. And if they still need me to go below, but it's a really good opportunity or a really good firm to be aligned with, so that I can get the next advisory engagement and be there for a while. I'll have conversations about, some kind of a revenue profit sharing, a revenue sharing kind of a thing. So if they get something based on the work I'm doing, I get that. Or if it's a small privately held thing, I'll try and look for bites of equity. So there's more than one way to get paid. So you've got to factor all those things in too. But you got to realize certain kinds of doing a project manager's role, you might be able to take a bit of an hourly cut for a completion bonus that's on time within 2% of target budget. And the bug window didn't extend beyond what was planned. There's always that, war room center you kind of set up at the end of a big project where you take in those initial calls because it's new to people. You can't test everything, so you got to fix things. But you set a time frame for that. And if you can finish that on time or early and you finish basically on budget, which to me is 2% above or below, for a budget that was set a long time ago, and see if you can get some kind of a reward on the backside. So you could make yourself more affordable, but you have a chance to make more money. But you got to make sure that reward makes up almost doubles what you gave up the hourly rate.
Right. Because you're also taking on some risk.
You're taking risk. It's risk reward.
Yeah. I like that. That's a great consideration. I want to, I have one more kind of big question, and then I have a couple rapid fire close wrap up questions that I want to ask you as we start to near the end of the podcast. You work 3 to 6 months, right? That's your ideal, that you don't want to work. You're not working full time.
I'm not working full time, and I would like, if I'm coming in as my advisor for an initiative, I'd like it to be 3 to 6 months. And if I prove myself to be an effective advisor, they'll tend to just keep me on for the next thing and the next thing. You sort of become a retainer employee. So the retainer time might go down a little bit, but if you can get on a retainer where they're just buying you to make sure you're available to do things for them every once in a while, then that becomes a recurring stream of revenue that doesn't take up your full time. And so you can take on the next thing.
Got it. And how many projects do you typically take on at a time?
No more than 2.
Okay. Because
mental energy and trying to make sure I'm giving my best to everybody. If you spread yourself too thin, you're not paying enough attention to everybody. And they're paying you good money to do it. So you got to make sure you're there.
Right. Well, this has been fascinating. And now I have a couple closing questions. You've already answered one, but maybe you'll have another recommendation. What's one book, podcast, or resource that's been invaluable to your consulting practice?
Oh, I can't. One is the hard thing because I listen to so much. I literally, I'm one of those people that probably reads 30, 40 books a year, plus articles every day. My advice is spread yourself out. If you're a marketing person, don't just read marketing. Don't just read business books. Read fiction, read art history, do things. Stretch yourself laterally, because there's another book that I read. It's called Range. I forget who wrote it off the top of my head, but it talks to the point that
Rage as in
range,
RAGE?
RANGE,
A
yeah,
range.
range.
Okay.
And it's the concept of as people move up in organizations, they become generalists. No CFO of a Fortune 2000 company got out of college and got that job. They went through a process. They learned, they grew. And the more you know about more things, the easier it is to stretch and adapt when something you're unfamiliar with comes your way. So my biggest advice is just to read everything as much as you can. Um, that's my big. And you listen to podcasts, you watch YouTube channels that are appropriate, and sometimes, but watch some things just because they're fun. I mean, my wife and I just finished watching The Diplomat this weekend. It's a great show. It's fun. I mean, you gotta do all that too. You gotta be well-rounded.
Okay. So not all serious stuff.
No.
So what is one piece of advice you just gave a great piece of advice to the consultants listening to this. What's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you started your independent business?
When I started my independent business, I actually had a lot of good advice. I hired a coach. That was a good piece of advice. So I had a nice coach. I involved several of my close and respected colleagues. So when I was writing the book, they were reading the chapters behind me, giving me suggestions and comments. So you can look for help that way from your close network of friends and associates. So you can do those kinds of things. But the one thing I wish I thought of, and it's become something I do now, is there's a concept of always preparing for the next wave. Your surfing is an analogy. I used it in today's newsletter. Surfing is an analogy. When you're on your board and you're looking at the wave, you're looking for promising swells. You pick one, you go to it, you get in it, and you ride the wave, but you have to exit at the right time so you don't get clobbered, you don't lose your board, so you can go look for the next wave. And you've got to be paying attention to what's coming next, because it's easy if you get yourself enmeshed in a project on one thing and you do two of those in a row, suddenly you're a commodity because your skills are old. And skills age so much faster now than they used to.
Yes.
So you've always got to
Yes.
be thinking about what's the next different thing that you've never done before that you need to be prepared to be able to do for somebody that builds on your pool of expertise, but is still more. So always look for the next thing.
Love it. And I love the surfing analogy. And finally, this is the most important question. How can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more about you and your work and your book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon. It's inexpensive, so you can just Google my name. It's the easiest because I'm the only one out there who wrote a book. But the best way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. That is my primary communications channel. You'll see everything that I write, and I always check for messages, and I'm looking forward to hearing from people.
Wonderful. And the LinkedIn link will be in the show notes for those of you listening.
Excellent.
So Mark, it has been a delight to interview you today. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Thriving Through podcast. And for those of you listening and watching out there, keep thriving through.
Thank you very much.
I hope you found Mark's insights as valuable as I did. His framework for thinking about the three types of consultants really clarifies why some consultants struggle to command premium rates while others build thriving practices. When you position yourself as an advisor who teaches clients to be self-sufficient rather than a contractor who just does the work, you fundamentally change the value you bring and the relationships you build. Two things really stood out to me from this conversation. First, Mark's advice to always be preparing for the next wave. It's so easy to get caught up in current client work and forget that your skills are aging faster than ever. The consultants who thrive are the ones who are continuously learning and positioning themselves for emerging opportunities while delivering excellent work today. Second, his point about reading broadly across multiple disciplines resonated deeply. As consultants, we often think we need to specialize more and more. But Mark makes a compelling case that reading fiction, art history, and subjects outside your core expertise actually makes you more valuable to clients because you bring fresh perspectives and creative solutions. If you want to connect with Mark, check out his book, The Leader with 1,000 Faces, on Amazon, and connect with him on LinkedIn, where he shares weekly insights. You'll find all the links in the show notes. And if you're getting value from these conversations with self-employed consultants who are building businesses that work for them, please share this episode with another consultant who might benefit from Mark's wisdom. And if you haven't already, please follow the Thriving Through podcast so you don't miss future conversations. Until next time, keep thriving through.